Heather. Thanks for everybody coming back. All right, so I'll just skip ahead. We know that you're from all over. We thank you. If you're tweeting, there's the hashtag and include me at Jacobwith. And what I was talking about is what I tell organizations that I do is help them to build the foundation of their communication. And this was actually the first floor that's showing on the screen here of a 100,000 square foot, 100-year-old mill in Lowell, Massachusetts. The Lowell Community Health Center is a project I worked on a couple of years ago. And we created something from nothing. They literally had 0 donors when we started, and they raised over $5 million. So the power of a story. What I will tell you is one of the positions that I did have was executive director. Actually, it was president and CEO was my title of the Prevent Blindness Foundation chapter office in Phoenix, Arizona, a number of years ago. And when I started my job, there on my desk was a thank you note from a woman named Paula with a picture of her daughter, Madison. And she said, "Thank you so much. We didn't know that our daughter was blind in her left eye when she started kindergarten, and because your volunteers came and gave a screening to all of the children, she was literally not seeing anything, and now she's got glasses and an eye patch, and will tell our story to anyone." Well, I was new to the city at the time, and I had started with this huge staff of me, and I was asked to expand the work that we did from our 12 volunteers and the 1 grant we had received that was supposed to last for a year or two, and screening only a few hundred children, to really exponentially grow what we were doing. And so I asked Paula and Madison at 5 years old and 6 years old to share their story. They became the best fundraisers that we had, and they really never asked anyone for a gift. They talked about how Madison's life was different. They talked about what it cost to purchase a camera to do the vision screening, which was $2,500, and we had 1. They talked about what it cost to train volunteers and how proud they were. Now, we shared other stories, but I shared that story, and we shared that story at our organization over and over and over again, so that after 2.5 years, when I moved on and was hired by the Department of Ophthalmology down at the University of Arizona down in Tucson, we had 5 staff. I had trained almost 900 volunteers. Our budget grew almost, I bet between 75 and 80% of that 1.2 million was from individual giving. But what I was most proud of was that our footprint increased. We had gone from a minuscule footprint in Phoenix to a pretty large footprint, and we had waiting lists for schools and organizations that wanted us to come in and do our vision screening. So one story can make a huge difference. What I have for you today is just to define real quickly the difference between fundraising and development. Talk about why do we tell stories. I know you share them. You've got some of the best stories out there, but why do we share them? I've got a framework for you to craft powerful stories, but then I want to teach you what is my secret sauce, I call it, and that is how to take your story to an advanced level so people really do understand what you're looking for and why you're looking for it. And then we'll talk about sharing your stories, how to do that, how to train others, and then I've got some final thoughts and wrap up for you. And I want to just say a little shout out to Tracy, because I believe the folks from Manchester are on, and I know them from my training days many moons ago. All right, so before we dive in, I've got a question for all of you. So if you would type into the question box your answer. I'm looking for the answer to the question, what are you looking for today? What was it that brought you to this session, the kickoff to your fall webinar series? What did you want to get? What are you looking for? Why are you here? That will help me understand if I'm covering everything, and to point out some things as we go about what you were looking for in specific. So go ahead and just type into the question box. I'll read a couple of comments from a few of you. Usually first name only sometimes. How to be an effective and inspirational storyteller. Awesome. More effective is a great word. Engaging and effective are the two things that I always want to be. I want to learn how to draw the stories from our club members. Awesome. Shauna will give you some questions and tools to do that. To learn to tell genuine, authentic stories that advance our mission. And advice at just how to tell a story about our organization without focusing on the sappiness. Oh, I love that word. Great. Thank you. New and unique ideas for sharing donor stories and how to potentially better combine stories and data. Good. We provide a lot of stats. We want to bring the narrative back to the people we serve. Yeah, good comment there, Danielle. How to have further reach with our stories within our community. All right, all good things. We'll cover all of that and more. So let's get to it. First thing I like to do, no matter if it's a live session like this, a recorded session, or if I'm in person in the room with you, is I like to do the definition of two specific words. Now, often this gentleman here is indicative of how some of your board members or volunteers might feel. Fundraising is the asking part, of course. This is when we're raising money, raising resources from various people, various entities, corporations, foundations to support your organization or a specific project. The definition comes from the Association of Fundraising Professionals Dictionary, which I've been a part of the AFP for a long, long time. Fundraising, though, often gives people sweaty palms, heart palpitations. They just simply do not want to ask people for money. And if there are board members on here, which I know there are a few, the good news is I don't believe you have to. I believe, though, that you want to do the second thing, and that is participate in development. Development is the process that your organization goes through to increase public understanding of who you are, why there's a need for you in the community, why you do require outside funding and support, so that when the organization sends me that letter, that fall appeal, invites me to your event, the golf tournament or the wine tasting or the whatever it is, and you're inviting me to make a gift, I already understand why. And I believe that it's everyone's job, from the receptionist to your parents, to the kids even, to your staff, your volunteers, anyone who participates in your organization in any way. It's our job to communicate powerfully in a fun way why we exist. What is it that we do that's important? And the next question I have for you then is, when you're communicating with those people and sharing those stories or those statistics, what is it that you want them to do? What action do you want people to take? And I'd like you to be as specific as possible and type your answers right into the question box again for me, so I can see how specific you're being when you're talking to folks. And you are able, of course, as you can see on the screen, you can download the slides during the session here. You can follow along on the screen, and the slides will be available. So what I'm looking for is the question that's on the screen there. What is it that you want people to do? What specifically do you want them to do? You want them, Kelly says, advocate for our mission, make a donation and engage others. So I'm going to ask you, Kelly, be really specific. How would you want me to advocate? How much money do you want me to give? How do you want me to engage with other alumni? Adriana, what is it that you want me to do if I hear a story? Ron says, to see our organization as I do, which is how. How do you see it? I want them to be compelled to give by our story and to share it with others. So those are two specific and different things, Danielle, so that's great. You want them to be compelled to give time. How many days would you want? How many hours? You want them to give dollars? How much? What would it take to support a whole season, a whole fall school year of new kids coming in? How many dollars? What else do you want me to do specifically? Adriana says that we want people to see the need in our community and to be compelled to help in either donations, volunteering, or to spread awareness. So what I'll tell you, all of you you're doing great, and you're being really general, which is normal. But part of why I talk about sharing a story and making sure that I know what it is you're looking for is so that you can stand out amongst all the other organizations in your community that are looking for me to give money, give time, do something. The more specific you are, the more likely I am to take action. So if you want me to hear about Christina, who is 7 years old, and she's new in your program, and it takes about, and I'll just guess an amount because I don't know, it takes about $150 to make sure she's able to participate in your program, plus some scholarship dollars. And her life is really, really different because she's got a safe place to be after school, and she's got folks making sure that she's getting better grades, she's listening, she's paying attention in school, she's not ashamed of her grades. I incorporate both facts and the bits of information about her in my story. So you want to pay attention to what are folks paying attention to on your Facebook page, on your website. Pay attention to some of those analytics. Just doesn't have to be a big deep dive, but I take a look at which blog people are reading and sharing on social media. Which one of those articles that I write shows up again and again, is sort of evergreen and helpful. You want to pay attention to what is it that people want to know from you, and then share with them the impact that you're making possible because of them. So you want to talk about me and the impact I make possible. And that's through the eyes of one person, one child, one adult, one staff person, one board member. Doesn't matter who that person is, but you're going to be able to brag about yourself more and talk about even more some specifics because of the way you share that story. And I'll teach you a little bit about how to do that in a moment. I've got 3 quick poll questions for you. So I'm going to choose my first poll question and launch it here. The first question is pretty simple. It's a yes/no, so you can click on the screen there just to make sure you're answering yes or no. Our board regularly shares stories about our work. Yes or no? And we've got about a third of you voted. Let's have a couple more, and I will close it out in just a second or two here. Going. Couple more votes. 1, 2, 3. We'll close it out. Looks like about 75% of you say yes, and 25% of you say no. All right, so good to know. Let's hide that one and go back to poll question number 2. And that question is another yes/no question. Our staff regularly share stories about our work. Yes or no? I hope this one is 100% yes. It's usually pretty close to that. All right, I'll let 1 more, 2 more votes come in. Let's close it out here. And this is 86% yes, 14% no. So you may want to share the definition of development with your team, the fundraising, non-communication staff folks, and just let them know that by talking about our work, one person at a time, they're helping to raise awareness. They're helping other people understand who you are and what you do. And the last question I have, you can find at least 1 story on our website. Yes or no, a people story. And I went to quite a few of your websites before we started today, and I would agree with the poll numbers that are coming in right now. I'll give you another couple of seconds here to vote. 1 more, 2 more votes coming in. And, all right, there's 1 more coming in. All right, let's close it out. 63% of you said no. 38% said yes. So what that tells me is we haven't yet found a way to share our impact right there on our website. So we'll maybe give you some ideas on how to do that as we go through here today. Thanks for doing that poll with me. Whether you are writing an annual fundraising plan or you are figuring out your communication plan, your donor communication plan, or just your overall agency plan, or your board training, or your staff training, what I'd like to have you do is make sure that you're focusing your time on actions that cause you to know your supporters, to share clear messages about what happens when I make a gift, to hold yourselves and others accountable for whatever it is we said we would do. So if you decide you're going to shift the storytelling culture, you want to start to measure how many times we're sharing stories, and always be inviting participation. People to share their story with you, their experience of who you are at Boys and Girls Clubs and why they love you, and even drill that down into a one-person example. So just to review for a few of you and some reminders, the reason we tell stories is our brains are wired in such a way that we think in story. Every decision that we make, the decision to show up here today, did you bring an umbrella or not, where you work, where you live, what car you buy or don't buy, all of that is based on the story we tell ourselves. If we don't feel something, we actually can't make a decision. So we can't decide whether or not to give to an organization, to volunteer with that organization, if we don't feel something. And the truth is that feelings come through, those interactions that we have in our brain. This is about all the science I know here about dopamine, so don't worry, it's not a real scientific presentation. But you know that pleasure is the thing that motivates us. When we do something we like, our brain creates that dopamine rush. So whether it's eat something we love, or go for a run, or read a great book, or have a great conversation with someone. The cool thing is, research shows that our brain's pleasure circuits are also activated when we give to an organization that we love and when they acknowledge us in a way that causes us to feel great about what we've already done or what we're about to do. I had a young lady at one of my training sessions decide that she was going to call her team now forevermore dopamine disbursement ambassadors. They really are about sharing stories about how their college makes a difference to students in the community. So knowing that you've got this opportunity to have me feel great before I make a gift, when I'm making a gift, and after I'm making a gift by just the communication choices that you make. The good news is it's not about how well you tell the story. It actually is about your passion and the picture that you're creating. You're painting this picture of someone's life and how their life is different because of being a part of Boys and Girls Clubs. No matter what city I'm in, I know that many of the programs will be very similar, and the outcomes will be great because that is the standard that you've set. So knowing that stories about your impact, stories of those children, stories of their teachers, stories of their parents, they are there to create unforgettable emotional connections and some empathy. Empathy is when I can see myself or someone I love in the story that you're sharing. So you want to be as specific as possible, and I'll give you some ideas about how to do that. Sympathy creates a distance. So we're not looking for people to be upset or feeling sorry for anyone. What I really want is for folks to feel connected to the why. Why you exist, what's missing in the community, and why I know that my gift to you of time, talent, stuff, or money is making a huge difference. Now, part of the process, of course, is finding the stories. Someone just asked me yesterday on a group coaching call, but how do I know that the story I'm choosing will be the right one? Well, the answer is you will never know that it's the very right story. So get really good at telling one or two or maybe three different stories from different viewpoints of people at your organization. And then ask more questions of the person you're talking to so you can learn their story and or learn more about what lights them up. But what I want to help you with first, and some of you alluded to this at the beginning, I want to help you find some of the best stories. First thing I do is I define a story and an example of your work as a mission moment. It's a short, inspirational example of how you are making an impact in the community. And as I already said, it has to be about a real person. It could be anybody. I've even heard amazing stories about the janitor or the receptionist, a long time volunteer, or a first-time donor. The truth is, if you are asking me to tell you a story, and I'm one of your program staff, or I'm a former board member or a former staff person, and you say, please just, Lori, share a quick story, I will probably give you the deer in the headlights look. My palms will start to get sweaty, and I will not know what to say because we don't always know that we know stories, first of all, and we for sure think we don't know how to put a story together. What I do want you to understand is storytelling is different than fact-telling. And I would bet that many of the stories that you currently are sharing are a group of facts that you've put together, and they haven't quite made the mark of what I would call a engaging emotional story. So to find those powerful stories, you want to ask open-ended questions from your staff and donors and board members and all kinds of people. So you're not asking them to tell you a story. You're not putting them on the spot. You're actually digging for what I call the nuggets in order to build a story yourself. I can pull together 6, 7, maybe 10 bits of information about pretty much any organization and a person at that organization, and I can tell you a pretty compelling story about that person. But it's because I've been listening really carefully about some of the things you're saying or not saying, or I've dug around on your website to know more about what you do, and I put those together in a way that has you feel even more connected to your mission sometimes. So I'm going to have some slides come up that have the word module in front of a number. I have a system called the Complete Storytelling System, and I just note when some of the information that's in there comes from that module. So don't worry about you missed modules 1, 2, and 3 or anything like that. Part of what you're doing when you're helping others identify their mission moments is you want to ask specific questions. So a question I love to ask staff is, who can't you get off your mind? Who do you remember from your first week, your first day, or who do you still think about weeks later? Some of the families that you serve, some of the kids, what was life like before us? Especially asking that of the parents is key. Some of your donors, ask why do you give your money and your time? Why have you given so long? Why did you make your first gift? I really encourage you to ask some of your vendors and your sponsors, who have you met here that inspires you? There's a long list of questions you can come up with, but the point is ask open-ended questions, not questions that can be answered with a yes or a no. You want to dig down deep to identify 1 or 2 or 3 just short, quick examples of how your impact is unfolding in the community. So I'm going to pause for a second and have you type in the first name only of someone that you would say is your mission moment person. Who is it? You don't have to tell me the whole story at all. I just want to know the first name, someone that you think of when you think of Boys and Girls Clubs. And I want you to get in mind some things about them, because we're going to have you think through the process of how you'll take that example of Frank or Christy or Blake, whoever you've got, But I'd like to see all of you, and there are quite a few of you on the call, but all of you at least, yeah, good. Now you're popping them in. Just a first name is all I need. That helps me know you'll be looking through this next portion of what I have to share with you through Sierra's eyes or Katrina's eyes. All right, very good. A few more. Kaimanta, what a great name. Javanti, James, Nicole, Natasha. A few more. There's a couple of you missing. Go ahead and type in the first name. All right, very good. I'll keep watching for them. So here's what my framework is. To take that mission moment, your mission moment, Hallie, might be yours. Why did you decide that this was a great organization for you? So maybe use yourself as we go through this next process. So you're taking this opportunity that you've had to meet someone, talk to them, maybe even learn a little bit about them, and you're going to turn it into a story. The first part of the process is you identify that person, you jot down as much as you can, their name, their age, some descriptors about them, what they look like. I was learning about a boy named Jesse yesterday who's 12 years old. He has braces and the biggest head of fluffy blonde hair, which gave me this great visual, but he's extra short. He's not the tallest kid. In fact, he's the shortest kid in his class. So you want to just jot down some things so that I can start to see that picture of that child or that adult, whoever it is. And then the third step in my process is you want to start to jot down what I call exact results. Those are things that can be measured. Test scores started going up. Paid attention in math. Wasn't acting out as much. Maybe wasn't swearing like they were when they showed up that day, or pushing people around, or maybe they're really, just finishing homework in a timely fashion. Things you can measure, things we can see, and those are the specific facts. But then I like you to also look at and make a list of what are the transformations? What are the things that you can't measure? You notice they were not as shy as they were at the beginning of the year. Or they even told you they feel like they don't feel so lonely after school, or they feel like they have a place where they belong. Those descriptions are the parts that you'll add to your stories that make them engaging, that make them the emotional connection that has me have some empathy. Because I may have felt that very same thing, or I've seen someone, a child in my life, feel that, or an adult in my life. The next part of the process is to start to notice words in your day, and as you're dealing with some of the folks that are a part of your organization, they can be your students, your staff, your volunteers, words that are emotionally connecting. I carry a notepad with me and jot down words that I love, that I want to share again all the time. So you want to pay attention to the placement of emotionally connecting words. So I really understand the issues or the background or the frustration or the pride or the feelings that that child or that donor or that person has about you. Those feeling words, those emotionally connecting words, are what take your story from what I call sort of a boring ho-hum story to a brilliant story, a story that I want to share with others. Let's see, now I'm not going to take the time to do that. I'm going to keep moving so we have plenty of time for you to ask questions. The next part of the process is really to fit the story into a framework where you're talking about what was life like before, what's life like today, and where is this person headed, whether they're a donor, a volunteer, or one of your students. You want to share your story, written, spoken, on social media, wherever you can, but you want to use all kinds of different formats, so shorter, longer, and you want to practice, especially if you're telling the story often. On Tuesdays, I coach people on how they share their story out loud in a group setting on a webinar like this, and they start to coach each other. And first week, everyone's scared, and then it gets to be at the end, they can share each other's stories with each other in a way that is compelling and emotionally engaging. So here's the framework that I have for you. It's pretty simple. It starts out with, let me tell you about. Rather than saying, I'm going to tell you a story about one of our children in our after-school program at Boys and Girls Club, you've got about 4 seconds to grab my attention. And if you tell me all of that first, I've already tuned out to think about, I wonder how long this story is going to last, who's picking up dinner tonight, or do I have to pick up the dry cleaning or the kids or the whatever. So you want to just start right in with, let me tell you about. And Javante had a life of whatever it is. Here's how he came to us. You want to stay away from some jargon. There's some language you might use in a grant proposal that's different than you might use when you're just talking to me. Make sure that if there's some unasked for situation that Javante's dealing with, you're sharing that with me. You're explaining that's why he had to be a part of our program, and we're so thrilled that he found us and his teacher made the recommendation or his mom found us. It's not like, you know, the stork just dropped them off on your doorstep. There's something that happened. Then you want to make sure you talk about how he or she feels. What did they accomplish in your program, both the transformations and those exact results, so that I can get connected and I can see that picture of this child or this adult or this donor. And because of whatever the name of that person is and our program or that exact project that they worked on, here's what their life is like now. And I love it if you say, you know, I wish you could have seen the day that Javante ran in after school to show us his math paper, to show us he got 100%. We know that all the hours and time spent coaching and talking to him about paying attention in school and how to do his math really paid off. And so he got to play more today because he didn't have any homework to do. That kind of sharing has me understand exactly the kind of difference that you're making. So this template is a part of an ebook, and the ebook has got 10 pages in it. You can download it anytime you want to. Maybe Heather will take that URL down as well, boring2brilliant.com, and share it with you afterwards. But that template you can print out. I use that template if I'm coaching a testimonial speaker, or I'm coaching an organization to write a story for their appeal letter or their website. I use that template all the time so we can really focus on all the pieces that will cause me to listen. And I like to have you count how many feeling and descriptive words that you're including in your story. At least 5 times you want to say something that describes the person and how they were feeling. So I want to give you an example of what I mean. And this is a before and after story. And I will read to you the before story and tell you the after story. This is a story that is true. It came from an organization that I did some work with, and they said they were really pleased that they had this story on their website. The story goes like this. Mrs. Lee is one of our subscribers to our theater series. She's been a part of our theater family for many years. Mrs. Lee loves the performing arts and rarely misses one of our shows. She often brings guests with her and makes sure we know that she is spreading the word about our quality performances. We love Mrs. Lee as much as she loves our theater. Now that, to me, is a report. That is a list of facts about Mrs. Lee. How I rewrote their story for them was to say, at the tender age of 9, the first show that wide-eyed young Amanda saw was a 3-hour-long production of Camelot. Now at age 79, Mrs. Amanda Lee loves to remind us that she can still recall that first time the music began and she was swept away in that play of Camelot. It's not surprising she's been one of our most passionate patrons. Even when money was tight, she brought her kids, her son and daughter. They were dressed in their best Sunday outfit to the People's Theater. And now she opens the eyes of her grandchildren to the magic of live theater. Mrs. Lee is pretty tiny in stature, and she's lost some of the spring in her step, but she still has a twinkle in her eye, and she tells us that her experience of live theater is better than any therapy or medication or any of the rehab work that she's supposed to do to make her old joints feel better. What hasn't changed for her is that she loves our theater She reminds us that we are a place where memories are made, dreams are woven, and passion is felt. So type into the question box, while it was longer, so that's one difference, what is it that I did differently about the story than the first version? What did I do that might have kept your attention or caused you to feel something? You feel like you know Mrs. Lee. Awesome. I love that, Shauna. Added some descriptive words, use of imagery. It was a narrative. It was more dynamic wording. So this takes a little bit of time, but you're spot on, everyone. Really, when it's time to jot down that story for the newsletter, or you're creating that moment when you make the announcement of who your kids are that are being awarded this season, or whatever it is, really think about what are the details that I could learn about them that would have me fall in love with them. How can I see them and see over the course of time a little bit and even understand what's in their heart or what's behind, in their head and what they're thinking and feeling. It takes a little longer, but I can tell you honestly, it will hugely impact your bottom line. So let's dive into the advanced storytelling part, my secret sauce, if you will. This is my favorite part. So I just want to remind you that people's head and heart both have to be engaged in order for them to take action. So I have to be compelled by the story, and I have to know some of what it is that you're missing so I can insert myself into there. And I have watched over and over and over where organizations, the more they talk about the money, when they blend their money story in with their people stories, they raise more. I had an organization that had to raise $6 million in central Minnesota over the last couple of years on top of their annual $2 million annual fund. And they were very, very worried that they'd be stealing donors and their annual fund would drop. What happened is, because we shared stories more often, we talked about what the money was for, we talked about how people's gift would make an impact, their individual donor fundraising, their annual fund dollars increased 26%, and they raised the $6 million. So watch, what secrets are you keeping from your donors that you don't need to? What does it cost, and what do I pay? If I'm a part of your program, what is the true cost? And what do you have to raise to close that gap? That's something that you want to share with me regularly. There's a reason you exist in the community, so you want to understand that and have your board understand that. There's a money story that you have, and that is, how much do you have to raise this year? How much does a program cost? Do you have any waiting lists? Do you have schools waiting, other people waiting? What's going on that causes the need to increase every year? And you want to share a one-person example so you understand this message pyramid from the top down when you're sharing that with your board. But really, you want your conversations to happen out in the community from the bottom up. So you want your board members, your staff, your kids, whoever it is, to be talking about that one-person example that has me understand why there is a funding gap. And that funding gap, your money story, is what you project in expenses for the whole year, subtract away what you've already received, not what you're going to get, but what you've already received. And folks often come back to me and say, oh, but we'll get more programming money in November or December, or if we're on a different calendar or fiscal year in January. What if someone could write you a check for all that you are looking for between now and the end of the year? Would you not want to end the year way in the black? Wouldn't that be exciting? I've watched organizations share their gap, whether it's program gap or their overall individual donor funding gap, and honestly, truly raise percentages, double digits, 20, 40, 60% more, because people didn't know that there was that gap in that program. So here's what I want to know. I won't say any names, but I would like you to type in what's the amount you have to raise between now and December 31st. Do you know? If you know the number, go ahead and type it in. What is the number that you have to raise All right, 64,000, hot off the press there. Very good. What else? Who else? More thousands. I know you've got some others. 255,000, 75,000, not sure. Another 75,000. So I want to address that. Someone said 1.4 million, someone said 200,000. So I'll just call you A. I won't say the name. If you're in the black already, that's just fine, but then you want to go back and figure out what is that visionary amount that you might want to be raising, because I have to have a reason to be compelled to give to you. So you wouldn't want to say we don't have a gap. You would want to say, here's where we're headed. We're headed to be a $2.5 million organization over the next 5 years, and this year we're going to add an additional $25,000 to what we're going to raise. So we can add that other staff person, or we can add a 403B retirement program for our staff. You want to have me know that there's more to do. There's always more to do in our programming, in our work. So if you're working to get a new van, absolutely. What will it cost to purchase that van? If you have new programs you want to add, absolutely. I love that some of you know exactly, and I know that some of you don't know. Some folks say to me at this point, I don't want to talk about the fact that we have a gap of $225,000. We've never talked about money in this way before, and if we tell people we have an $800,000 funding gap, they'll think of us as a lost cause. How do we tell people about a funding gap without scaring them away? Well, the truth is you've had a gap every year, every day since your organization opened its doors. And you've closed that, or you've nearly closed it every year. But the more transparent you are in talking about what it takes to do your work, notice my language. I didn't say what we need, because frankly you don't need anything. It's the students that come to your programs that need something. So what it takes to deliver your programs, what it takes to serve the community, what it takes to provide for the kids that are in our programs. When I hear it that way, it doesn't feel like you're asking me for anything. It feels like you're reporting to me something. So when you speak the truth, even if your voice shakes, some pretty amazing things can happen. An organization here in Minneapolis called Upstream Arts provides programming for people with disabilities, very young children all the way up to adults and seniors. They're in many of the schools, but they're in other programs as well, and they're in Minnesota and Wisconsin. But they had a donor call them in December to say, what is our funding gap? I want to make sure my final gift of the year is enough. How many of you would like to have your donors be paying attention to what your gap is so they can make a second gift or a third gift in the year? Let me go back for a second and just say Julie on the left there in the picture said, talking about our funding gap was our lifesaver. She said, we started out working with you, Lori, and we had to raise about $20,000, maybe $23,000. They're a very small organization, a lot of government funding. They had their 10th anniversary this spring, and they raised $100,000 this year. So they've truly changed their culture for people to understand there's a vision of growth and there's work to do, but there's a place for people to fit in. You want to make sure people understand that their gift size, it just, any size matters. $25 can close a gap in a program for one student to that $1 million gift. The organization Creative Care for Reaching Independence up in Fargo, Minnesota, really talked about their money story. They began raising more, larger gifts. They got media attention, community, and especially corporate support. But more than anything, their board members found it comfortable to talk about their people stories and their money stories. And that caused them to build this whole army of ambassadors. They had a session that I delivered with them a couple of years ago. It was a board session. They talked about having a goal of raising 5 $1,000 gifts, and one of their board members went home to his office and talked to his staff and said, let's do what we can, and they collectively at his company became the first $1,000 donor. The board met a year after that and really talked about what they would do. Shannon, the executive director, and their staff person, Jody, she'd previously asked people to do things and they wouldn't even make eye contact, but she said last night 4 people offered to make thank you calls, job shadow so they understand our work better. 2 people volunteered to be in our speakers bureau. 1 board member reminded the board that they had all agreed to make their financial contributions by February. 1 woman said we should be making a way for donors to give commodities since we're in a farming community. And 1 board member jumped out of her chair and literally knocked it over and said she would donate a truckload of grain. She wanted to be the first commodities donor. So it changed their culture. By February 2014, when this was all happening, they received a $10,000 gift. That was their largest contribution to date. And since then, they've now received many $100,000 plus gifts. So sharing your stories, blending them with your people's stories, you want to make sure that you're building that people's story first. You include some costs per day or week or month or year, but you're not asking for money. You actually are inferring that there's more to do with more resources. But when you blend that people and money story, you keep it very short and factual. And you have me know that while you may not know the end of the exact story that you're talking about, or sometimes you do, you want to make sure that you're repeating that story often. The more times folks in your community understand that there is a gap between where you are today and where you're headed, they will start to want to insert themselves. I have literally thousands of real-life examples of executive directors or development directors or board members or communication staff or program staff talking about what it takes to close a gap in programming for 1 child or 1 veteran or 1 senior, and that person then talks about the whole amount for the program, and someone literally writes out a check for that whole amount, that $32,000, that $75,000. And they're blown away because they never expected that to happen. So you want to tell a story about a real person. This is my storytelling criteria. Use words that are emotionally connecting. Share very specific examples about how your work is making a difference and what those exact results and transformations are. But if you're telling a story, it's got to be 2 minutes or less. If you're telling a story on your website and writing it, it can be longer. But remember, you want to share via social media much shorter snippets. So you want to get really good at making sure that you're not having to have notes in front of you if you're telling that story, or you're tightening it up online. You can use pauses, voice inflection, really painting a picture with your words. And then practice. Invite people to practice with you. Because really, truly, to change a culture at your organization, I do a session called Causing Your Board to be Superstar Storytelling Board Members. Well, really, the crux of that session is to practice. And how you do that is you have everybody find their own mission moment. You use the worksheets, have them write out their story. You start to share those stories at board meetings, but you include the money part of that story. So after someone has worked with you on meeting a kid or meeting a donor, they've crafted their story, you tell them what some of the costs are for that specific thing that they're talking about. Talk about the gap that is being closed by supporters in your community. And when you have board members share stories at a board meeting, the way I like it to happen is you actually have board members volunteer, and someone's got to be chosen first, but after that first try, that first attempt, board members are volunteering for each month, 1 story a month. You time them. You literally have it shared in 2 minutes or less. You give a 1-minute time of feedback. Here's what we liked, here's what we want to know more of, less of, and then someone else takes the next month using some of that coaching in a different story. So internally, you're building a culture of having every staff, board, committee, team meeting start with what I call a mission moment. You're wanting to really find people who encapsulate what your core objective is. You want to tell those stories, 1 person at a time, but you tell them with passion, compassion, genuineness. You don't have to get it right every time. There's no right if you're really passionate. But I have to know that there's more to do when I hear that story or I read that story. Or the point is, you're simply sharing a report, a factual report with me. All right, I want to do a little bit of wrap-up, and then I want to make sure to take plenty of time for some questions and learn what you'll be doing next. So why I do this is so that I can help you make a difference. I love identifying the high achievers who want to do more, more, more. I like to meet people who want to take action and raise more money. So since we have time for questions now, we don't have time though for one-on-one questions. I do allow you to schedule some time with me to talk through your situation. And you can use the bit.ly link there to do that. It is a case-sensitive link, so you have to do the bit.ly/strategizewithlori with the caps on the first letter of each of those. You can also visit my website. There's a blog that comes out every Monday. Today I've got a bunch of resources for year-end fundraising. I've got a free download of the storytelling ebook or this 9 steps for successful fundraising campaign ebook, or you can just find some of the other resources there. Following me on social media is a great way to get some coaching as well. I'm always looking for ways to give you more ideas on how you can be more clear in your communication. Here's what I want to know first though. What did you learn that you could put into action right away? Would you go ahead and type that into the question box? What is it that you learned that you could put into action, put into practice as soon as possible, even maybe with your fall appeal or a fall fundraising event, or for sure on some of your social media? I want to just read a few of your comments off here. So what did you learn, if anything? I'd love to know. Stop using data and use stories. Okay, or blend the data with the story. That's okay too, Megan. Better storytelling. Add a story to our annual campaign appeal. Absolutely, Leandra. It can be a story I know about from something else you've talked about. Please add stories to your website. You can have it be simply learn about how you've made an impact. Click here, learn about how you've made an impact, and have a page of stories. I can find a few funding gaps to build stories around. Great. Use real stories as opposed to hypothetical. Yep. The message pyramid, I'm glad you like it. Don't hesitate to be more specific. It's the little granular details, the braces and the big fluffy blonde hair. Those things make a difference. So stop talking about our annual operating budget and talk about what it takes to do our work. Yeah. Include more descriptors. Organize a group of storytellers for my board and help them develop a 2-minute impactful story. Love that, Ron. Need to figure out how to gain access to local stories when we are working on national level interviews with local staff. Absolutely, for sure, local staff, but even ask folks in your community what they know about Boys and Girls Clubs. Do they have a Boys and Girls Club story themselves? Talking about the money is effective. Don't be afraid to bring it up. Yeah, talking about your funding needs. So what is something you could do between today, it's Wednesday, and next week Wednesday? Is there something you could do immediately? Is there someone you could interview? Just jot that down for yourself. The more, it is about 1,000,000,000% more likely to happen if you are publishing it, writing it down. You can absolutely share the slide deck with board members who couldn't participate. I want you to. The more you talk about funding gap, the more you have folks understand what it is and it's not scary, the more likely you are as a whole team, as a whole organization, to shift the culture of talking about money differently. Great. That's a great question. Let's get to some more. What other questions do you have? And I don't know what your practice is, Heather, if you unmute folks or not, but I'm happy to stick around as long as you've got questions for me. So either type into the question box there, or if you raise your hand, I don't know if we're able to unmute you or not. I'd be happy to talk with you voice to voice though. One of the questions I get often is, I don't know any stories, and I'm not participating in our programs in a way to collect stories. So I usually tell folks best thing to do really is I would go sit in the waiting room at the Department of Ophthalmology in our clinic, and I would let folks know my name and my title and that I was collecting stories. Of course, I had to get, you know, signed agreements from folks, and they had to sign the HIPAA agreement, but I found lots of stories that way. Adriana says we use radio PSAs a lot this year. Is 30 seconds or less enough? Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can tell you a story in 30 seconds. Let's see if I can't bring up a stop clock for you. And online stopwatch. This is a story I used to share at the Department of Ophthalmology. And what it is, and let me just, oops, let me clear that, and let me make this full screen so you can see it. All right. So I want to tell you about Sandra. She's 27 years old, and she needed cornea transplant surgery, something I don't know much about, but our doctors do. She couldn't see when she woke up in the morning. It really looked like she was looking at soap on the mirror. Through the surgery that she had, she is now able to see clearly and drive, leave her house alone, and be by herself, thanks to donors who've supported our International Fellows Program. So something really quick like that. Now normally I tell that story in about 45 seconds or so, maybe even 60 seconds, but you can tighten down a story share to be really, really tight. I haven't done that one in that short in a while, so yes, you can. I do teach you how to tell 6-word stories even, and it has to be a real story. It has to have a name, and it has to tell something about your organization. A 6-word story, if you think of one and type it in, I'll help you work through if it really truly is a 6-word story. Ron, afterwards Heather will be sending out a link with the slides and the recording, so you'll be able to access that. Other questions? Talk about the money, please. Find out about the money. What does it take? How many scholarships do you provide? What is it that you're doing that requires support from the community? Suggest adding a call to action along with the stories. Text to give, sure. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. One of the most effective organizations that I've seen in making sure that I understand that they need more is Charity Water. So I'm going to take you to Charity Water's social media. They have an Instagram page that I love, and on their Instagram page, when you click on a picture, and this picture was liked 1,278 times, wouldn't you like that? They talk about today is National Walk to School Day. Today we're raising awareness so we can help kids around the world spend less time walking to collect water and more time in school. Now they don't have any ask on here, but if you click on National Walk to School Day, I guess it takes you back to their the Instagram of National Walk to School. Often they will have something in their post that has me know there is more to do, and then I will click and go to their website. And sometimes it's even, there's a link to their website here, so they're inferring that there's more to do always. So whether it's an overt ask or a non-overt ask, you want to make sure that you're having me know there's more to do. I do, Ron, and part of what I can do is send a follow-up message to you on how to participate. I do offer more in-depth storytelling training. Other questions? Other comments? What do you say that most effective fundraisers have stories? Let's see. Would you say that the most effective fundraisers have stories that are told by board, development, CEO? I'm not understanding the question, John. What would I say that the most effective fundraisers have stories that are told? Yes, I would. I think I get it. What you're asking is, if you're the fundraising staff person, if stories are shared by the organization, especially the volunteer leadership and the staff leadership, is the fundraising more effective at that organization, or is that staff person more effective? Yes. No, you don't have to share the same story. That's a great question. I actually am a firm believer that each person gets to share their own story, the story that lights them up. That way, you can tell my sense of passion. If we all are learning Sandra's story, for example, you might not care about Sandra, you might not really want to tell that story about cornea transplant surgery, and that what I didn't get to say is she got to see the faces of her 7- and 9-year-old little boys the day she got her surgery, thanks to the work that we did at training her ophthalmologist. No, I'm a really probably outside-the-box thinker in that everybody should have their own story to share from their own perspective. Could be the child that they met, could be their own donor experience, it could be their child, and that child didn't have the after-school experience that your Boys and Girls Club provides. So you can have people choose their own. You just want to teach them the same format for how to create and draft and share that story. Hopefully that helps. But using that template can really help clear up what do I have to put in my story. You know, if you're talking about the let me tell you about, and using that over and over, that same template, people will start to get the framework, and they'll stay away from reports and stay closer to telling an actual story. Hopefully that doesn't scare you and feel like it's more work, because actually it can become less work, and it gives people their own perspective. So now you have the opportunity for board members and staff to coach each other on the stories that they're sharing. Let's see if I missed any other. I think I've got you all. Any other last questions? You can always go to my Facebook page or ask me questions on social media. I will do my darndest to answer your questions quickly, or if I have something that would help you and support you, I will send it off to you. Any thoughts from you, Heather, on do you want to tell what the next session is and the date of it?
Sure. The next session is going to be next week on Tuesday, October the 11th, and it is Creating a Culture of Philanthropy That Pervades Your Organization, presented by Susan Howlett, and she's a fundraising consultant and author.
Awesome. She'll be great. I'm excited I got to go first. All right, I'll hang out for another moment or two if you've got questions. Otherwise, go forth and share tons of stories. If you've got a before and after story, I love to see it. Just send it off to me, and you can do that. There's a comment feature on my website. You can send it through that. Way to go, everybody. Thank you so much.